November 20th, 1985, Microsoft introduced an operating system that would change the world. In 2012, Microsoft introduced Windows 8, and it changed the world again. A world that didn't like Microsoft. Now, 2015, on July 29th, Microsoft will finally release Windows 10, and once again, change the world. So this is it, the final build of Windows 10. Well, actually it's not the final build, it's more like the final build with bunny rabbit ears. But this just came out. If you are a Windows developer preview in Windows Insider person, guy, woman, you can go and get that right now. I'm on the fast ring personally, and I'm sure it's going to head out to the slow ring hopefully soon. The thing about it is you won't be able to visually tell which build you're on because they've actually removed which number build you're on in the lower right hand corner. But if you've taken a look around the interwebs, that's the best way to determine and figure out if you are on the said final build. And I keep saying quote unquote final build. There's no RTM apparently anymore. Like even the term RTM isn't officially being used by Microsoft because they're using Windows 10 as a service. So if you can imagine any other service that you use, might be an app or something along the lines of just something that you want to have kept updated on a monthly basis. That's what they're going to be doing with Windows 10. So they're going to be pushing out even updates, like larger updates in September, October, codename Threshold 2, apparently according to Mary Jo Foley, or TH2. And that's going to be bringing a bunch of new features to Windows 10, including extensions to the Microsoft Edge browser. But until then, I want to give a fairly in-depth look at Windows 10 with build 102.40. So I'm going to do my best to go over everything. If I miss something, please let me know in the comments. And also in the description, if you want to skip ahead to a certain section, I'm going to try and leave little time markers so you can just click on those. But let's go ahead and get started. So first and foremost, obviously, this is on a Surface Pro 3. The Surface was given to me by Microsoft, but it has no bearing on my review/impression. But even with that being said, as you've probably seen in other videos that I've done, I'm very, very happy. And, I'm sure a lot of people are as well too. So on a desktop or laptop experience, you're going to get the desktop that we grew up to know and love. But if you have something like a 2-in-1 or you just have a tablet that's 10 inches or smaller, you're not going to get a desktop. What you're going to get is essentially this menu, but blown up. So it's going to look like that. Or I guess I could have just gone to tablet mode. But it's going to look full screen with the old Windows 8 start menu or start screen. And, a lot of people have said, this start screen makes sense on a tablet, but it doesn't make sense on a desktop or your standard laptop. So Microsoft listened, and they did this. So again, this is the infamous start menu of Windows 10. You'll notice that in the start menu itself, you have most recently used applications, or at least most used applications. These programs down here are rather folders. These can be customized. So I customize them to have quick access to my documents, music, and settings, but you have some other options as well too. And I'm going to go into settings and show you where to do that. You have your power option down here, and of course, all apps can be found in alphabetical order. And if you're like me and you have a fairly long list of applications, instead of having to scroll through, one easy way to get to them is just click on the actual letter, brings up the alphabet, and you can just skip to the S's or the T's or what have you. This is similar to that of Windows Phone 8.1. So if you have a Windows Phone, you already know how to use this. But if you don't, it's actually quite useful, especially if you do want to go directly to that application. On this side here, it's your start menu. The start menu itself, combined with the start screen rather, it is actually fairly malleable. You can make this as big or as thin as you want. And in fact, if you want to completely get rid of the tiles, you can. But it would, probably be in your best interest not to, considering you'll just have this really thin column and it just looks kind of empty, if you will. But, if that's what you're going for, these are the options that people have been asking for, and here they are now. One really cool shortcut key that I use a lot in Windows 8 is Windows X. So on your keyboard, you can do Windows X, or you can right click on the Start menu, and you get what we call the X files, or the super duper programming file. So this is still the same, and that's the one thing with Windows 10. They're trying to keep it very similar, whether you're going from Windows 7 or Windows 8. And so you would, for the most part, see a lot of familiarity for both older operating systems. So you can still get to like your run, search, control panel, things like that. Next to the start button is Cortana. Now, Cortana, if you haven't heard, is Microsoft's personal assistant. So this, very similar to the likes of Google Now or even Siri, she can give you information of things that you have predetermined to her. Also, she can tell you what, weather conditions, things like that. Or you can even do cool things like this. Hey Cortana, send email to Celeste Hanides. Now, on to the right side, if you remember in Windows 8, the right side had the charms, which a lot of people, anecdotally, a lot of people didn't really use, or they didn't like it. They would activate it by accident, and it would flip or freak out. So they got rid of the charms, and there's still ways for you to search. You can go to devices and settings, and we're going to get to that very quickly. But search also has been moved in here, so it's not just your new Cortana, but she does do universal search. So if you were to type in something like you want to go to the program Word, you've got Word right up here. Or if you want to go to a specific document and you knew the name of the document, you could type it in there as well too. But on the right side now, you have two ways to get to what's called the Action Center. One, if you don't have a touchscreen, there's this little bubble here. It looks like a talking bubble. It also says no new notifications. I don't know if you can see that. When you click that, this pops out. This is the new Action Center. So in the Action Center, it'll give you notifications related to your email, Facebook, Twitter, applications that you have installed on your computer. It would also give you pertinent information about the computer itself. So if Windows Defender needs to be updated, or if there's a problem, it'll let you know right here. We've seen Action Center in Windows 8 and Windows 7, but this is kind of a new thing because it also culminates with the notifications of your specific apps. So I find it very useful, especially for the fact that we have a similar notification method on mobile phones, whether you have Android, iOS. Anyways, again, very familiar. Down at the bottom here, you have all of your toggle switches, which you can collapse just so you only see the top 4, and you can actually customize what these top 4 are in all settings. I had a question from another viewer from a previous video that said, hey, can you go through the settings and the control panel? So let's go ahead and do that right now. All settings is laid out fairly differently. Instead of just a list on the left hand side, which you had in Windows 8 at least, it's now in kind of a icon based menu system, and it tells you gives you an example of what is underneath each file system. So under system is going to be like your displays, and so this is again fairly familiar. So if you have multiple displays, like right here is where you're going to connect to your wireless display, like with the WDA or wireless display adapter. Your notification area, so this is where you can create your quick actions. So these 4 down here in the notifications, the quick actions, you can determine which ones that you want on or off. If you're like me, you don't really need tips about Windows, but you might want to keep that on for a new user at least. Turning off and on notifications, pretty self-explanatory. App features, this is where you can kind of uninstall in bulk. Multitasking, so multitasking is taking advantage of the virtual desktops, and we'll go into that a little bit more. Tablet mode, we kind of looked at tablet mode a little bit earlier, but just to kind of iterate, tablet mode makes everything full screen. So you no longer have the desktop. See? So there's no desktop that you go back to in tablet mode. It just goes back to the old within a week or so start screen. Battery saver, power, again, pretty much the familiar use of system in Windows 8. And the other nice thing too, and I'm not quite sure if you could do this on Windows 8, but if going to notifications or going to multitasking and switching that off and on was, or at least battery saver, if this was a system setting that you want to be able to access easily and quickly, you can right click and pin to start. And that actually does remind me, when you're pinning your applications from your apps here, again, very similar, you can either hold the screen like this, and you just move it over, or you can use your mouse if you don't have a touch screen and just move it over. If you want to get rid of them, you can right click and you can unpin from start, or long press and unpin from start as well too. Unfortunately, as it stands right now, unless they fixed it and didn't tell me, there's no real way to select multiple tiles to unpin them in one go. So if you remember, one really nice thing about Windows 8 was you can select multiple tiles and you could move the group in one fell sweep. It doesn't look like you're able to do that here. So I'm trying to do the shortcut key of control and trying to select multiple ones, and it won't let me do that. So as it stands right now, if you want to delete a tile or a group of tiles, you're going to have to do them one by one by one. I'm hoping that's a fix that'll come later on. Maybe that's something that you guys can help me out and upvote in the Windows Preview Insider Hub, if you will. But that's something that I really enjoyed, at least with Windows 8.1, and just made it easier to customize on the fly. Now going back to Systems and Control Panel, I was under the impression that when they had complaints that you could find your system, or rather your settings, in multiple areas, they said that from here on out, settings is going to be in one place and one place only, but that's not necessarily the case. First off, you can actually get the settings in a number of ways. You can pin it down here on the menu, you could pin it in the start screen area, or you can just make it be one of the main toggle switches in the action center. So there's three right there, and either way, it's still very easy to get to. But then also, that has nothing at this point to do with the control panel. So you still have your control panel to get to. As I showed you earlier, if you right click, you can get to your control panel that method, or you can pull up Cortana and type in control panel, and she'll give you the desktop app. So again, this is very similar to Windows 8 and a little bit of Windows 7. It says Windows 7 here. I don't know what says that. I'm kind of hoping that that goes away. There was never Windows 7 on the Surface Pro 3, I'd like to point out. But again, if you're familiar with this layout of your computer settings and using control panel in this method, it's going to be the same thing. There hasn't been a lot of changes, at least, in getting to the control panel and things like that. Also, if you want to create a backup or recovery, it did actually take at least 4 to 5 clicks getting to it from the control panel versus from settings. So if you want to create a recovery drive, for example, you can go to settings, 1, update and security, 2, recovery, 3, and then there you go. If you want to do it from the control panel, it's 1, and then I don't know. It's security, system and security, and this is where we weren't exactly quite sure, and we got lost, and I guess backup and restore right here, but this is where you can create a system image or repair disk, or if you want to you can just type that in and it'll bring you up how to create an actual recovery drive or restore point. So again, I kind of found it a little bit easier just to do it through the settings, but whatever floats your boat. Again, you have options, not as many options as Vista, which obviously caused the problem, but you still have options. Okay, so I kind of alluded to multiple desktops and virtual desktops and things like that. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that's all about. Let's open up 4 apps. So these 4 apps, some of the Windows Universal apps, these can actually be pinned, or rather the terminology that they use is snapped side by side. And this is something you could do in Windows 7, but in Windows 10 you can actually easily snap up to 4 apps in one desktop. And again, you could do that in Windows 7, but it wasn't as, I guess, fluid or easy, or it was just a different method that you would get to it. But imagine you want to open up 4 more windows. They might be separate windows or they might be separate programs. You, for whatever reason, do not want to cover these. You want these to always be in this format. You don't want to have to Alt-Tab, Alt-Tab, Alt-Tab through all the different programs that you have open. So now, taking a tip out of the books from, I guess, Linux, you can create new desktops. So you just go over here to where it says new desktops, you click that. So I create desktop 4. Now in desktop 2, I can pull up Facebook. And desktop 3, I could pull up Netflix. And with the cool shortcut key of Control, Windows, and the arrow key, I can go between all my desktops very easily. Now, I actually did another video previously showing that media upload and download, rendering, things like that, will still work in the background even if you're on a completely different screen. The only application that I saw that paused media was Netflix. So if you're watching something and you go away to another desktop, it pauses your video, which for me at least is kind of cool, but it doesn't pause streaming media from the likes of YouTube, Pandora, Spotify. So, pick your poison, figure out what works best for you. I personally like the fact that Netflix does pause. But maybe that's something that either Microsoft can work out with the other streaming platforms, or maybe that's not something that they're completely worried about. Now, the other thing too is, if you remember, if you wanted to share something within an application on Windows 8, you would swipe in from the right, go to share. Obviously, they don't have that anymore. So these applications that you find in the App Store now, not the desktop apps, but I guess the Windows Store apps, which can now be windowed, as you can see here, which you couldn't do before. You click in the upper left-hand corner where the hamburger menu is, and you have some other capabilities related to the actual app itself. So, if we go into Facebook and go into settings, this is settings related to Facebook itself, not settings related to the computer or the operating system. Same thing with share and search. So I'm obviously not logged in, so I can't do everything, and I don't think you would want to care to see my Facebook news feed. But either way, that's where you can look from here on out for some of the charm aspects. And in all due respect to charms, I think that's better, because if you remember, in Windows 7 or just your run-of-the-mill desktop apps, in the upper left-hand corner, that's where you had some options to like close or move or what have you. So it makes some sense in terms of design and, again, familiarity. Going over to something else that's kind of new is the store. So let's open this up here. So the store is all completely redesigned, because it's not just a store for your apps, it's also for your games, your music, and of course, movies and TV. So this is the one store that you're going to get for eventually Xbox, phones, tablets, and desktop and laptop computers. It makes it a lot easier to kind of go through, and this is something we've seen from iOS and Android, obviously, and so Microsoft is, in that sense, catching up. But, they had to, and it's good that they did. So the argument still to this date is, okay, well, you have one store, and your top free apps are obviously some of the most popular apps that are out there, but you don't have things like Clash of Clans or the latest version of Candy Crush Soda or whatever it's called. All I can say to that is, one, it's getting there, and two, hopefully with the bridges that they announced at Build earlier this year, the ability to port Android and iOS apps over with their new compiling system or essentially an emulator. Hopefully those applications will run smoothly and make developers a little bit more amicable to the Windows ecosystem. Because again, not only would you be able to play Clash of Clans on your Surface Pro 3, the idea is building that universal app, you could play it on your Xbox One. And all you had to do was port it over and build it once. And that's pretty cool. So we'll see how many developers really take advantage of that. But that's another thing that unfortunately will not be ready from day one on July 29th. They're still working out the kinks of those bridges of getting apps into the App Store. The other nice thing too is, so if we click on an application like Skype, for example, which is kind of ironic because this isn't supported anymore, only on RT devices, but this is just a little bit of an easier way to kind of scroll through all the reviews and screenshots and things like that. If you remember, in the Windows 8 and 8.1 store, it was scrolling from left to right, and I guess the majority of people aren't really used to reading your reviews and going through applications and trying to decide if they want to look at try to download it and going from left to right. Reading, we do read left to right, but we also scroll up and down. So this made more sense, and just the way the layout is, I think it's a much better layout. And yes, it's again inspired by some of the other app stores that are out there, but I'm glad that Microsoft finally followed suit with that. So this is available now in the Windows 10, and the old App Store used to be here. I don't even know if it's still even installed on here. You know, honestly, yeah, no, that's the new store. Honestly, I think the old store is this guy up here. It says at parentheses WinStore, yada yada yada. But I don't really know. So when the because when the final, well, not, I keep saying final build, but when the build that's supposed to completely release on the 29th comes out, I'm hoping this gets removed. If not, I'll just go ahead and uninstall it, but I don't want to uninstall it and possibly break something. All right. So let's go ahead and move over to Groove Music. So Groove Music is the new music app. So the reason why it's called Groove Music is, well, because it's groovy. It's also because, you know, if you have the old radio, or rather records had grooves. And in those grooves were beautiful pieces of music. And not to be confused with other code names that Microsoft has used in the past called Groove. This is purely for music. Anyways, it's pretty much the same thing, but what I do like here is down here, get music in store. So if there was something that you liked while you're streaming your music, either music that you own, these are all the songs that I own, or if you're using their Groove Music Pass, and you like the song and you want to buy the album, you can actually get it directly from the store here. Again, when you click on it, it opens the store, so that makes sense. Another application that people have been asking to take a look at is the Photos app. So let's take a look. So the Photos app is automatically connected with OneDrive, and I'm going to talk about OneDrive in just a little bit. And you can see me in the reflection. So hello. So you can add a folder, as it says here, telling the Photos app where you want the photos to be pulled from. If you're signed into OneDrive, as I should have been, this shows all the photos that are online in my OneDrive account. So you notice it groups them in the collection of timeline. So these were all taken on the day of July 12th, which incidentally was the birthday party for my daughter, and that morning we dropped the cake. So I went out looking for a new cake in a panic. And I think we chose this one, and it was delicious. This is an ice cream cake. But anyways, so it just makes it a little bit easier for you to go out, and if you know the date of when the event happened, it makes it a little bit easier for you to go out and grab that. So some of the other things that we have here, this can refresh just in case there have been some more photos that are uploaded to your OneDrive. You can select specific photos that you want to share, copy, or delete. And then you have the ability when you share that, these are some of the basic applications, at least the ones that I have installed, that I can share them to. It's kind of handy. And then down here in settings, this is where it shows like the different sources that it's pulling with regard to the photos that you can see. And then down here you see show my photos and videos from OneDrive. So here's the rub. When you're showing your photos and videos, these aren't downloaded to your computer. So I don't currently have my OneDrive sync turned on, and again, I'll get to that in a little bit too. But as you can see here, you can link the duplicates, so it's shown as one file. This includes copies that are even saved in different folders and raw files. And then with respects to enhancing your photos and things like that, this photo, which was a silly selfie, these are some of the editing tools. So basic fixes, you can do different filters, you can change the light, highlights, things like that, and change, I guess we pull this, there we go, and then the different shadows, or make it darker, alright, and then save. So in albums, basically these are the two albums that have automatically been created for me, and I guess the main reason why I only have two and not a bunch more is you have to put the photos that you want Windows 10 to create albums for in your actual picture folder. On this unit, I have no pictures in my picture folder. All of my pictures are saved online on OneDrive. So they created my camera roll from OneDrive. So that's at least the feeling that I have. And I'm sure once I get some more photos installed on my computer, you'll automatically see photos created based off of geotagging and chronology. Chronology? No, chronology. That one. So that's photos. The last thing let's take a look at that a lot of people have been wanting to see in action is Microsoft Edge. So this is the browser that's at the front of the computer. So when you see the little e down here at the bottom, do not confuse that with Microsoft Explorer. However, Microsoft Explorer is not dead. In fact, go to Cortana and type in the Internet Explorer, you'll see that it still pops up as your desktop app. And if you want to even play a fun little game here, you can go search for it through your actual apps. Open up the menu, go to All Apps, scroll all the way down to Windows Accessories, and it's right over here. There it is. So yeah, if you wanted to, just for kicks, you could pin that to start, or I guess at this point you could completely uninstall it. But again, I don't want to do that and possibly break my computer. I just, not everything is completely optimized for Microsoft Edge. But for whatever reason, there are some websites that aren't even optimized for Chrome or Firefox. So you might want to sometimes use Internet Explorer. Maybe not so often, but it's there for you just in case. So anyways, going to Microsoft Edge. For those of you who don't know, it's a lot lighter, runs a lot quicker, multi-process enabled, so you can run multiple tabs at the same time. It doesn't hog up your RAM as much as some of the other browsers do. And this is all not anecdotal. These are some of the tests that have been published that people have done through the different builds using Microsoft Edge, or as it was originally known as Project Spartan. One of the three new features that a lot of people have been really enjoying is a new reading mode. Now, there's actually been a reading mode in Internet Explorer, and especially on mobile, like the Safari browser, for example, there's reading mode in there as well too. But one thing I like about this reading mode is not only does it get rid of all the distractions and everything, you can actually go into your settings down here in your browser settings and change the viewing style from like light to dark. You can also change the font, and that's something, at least with the other browsers, I personally didn't really have an option to be able to do. Also, another feature that is built in to the browser is Cortana. So if you highlight a word or a series of words and you right click, you can ask Cortana and a knowledge graph will pop out, and there we get Pluto. And especially with the discovery of Pluto having actual like polar ice caps, and that the fact that it actually snows on Pluto, and the face of Pluto is really in Pluto, it's kind of cool, and it gives you all the pertinent information that has been pulled from Bing and some information directly from Wikipedia as well too. Cortana also gives you information about places. So if we did Pasadena, California, or we can just highlight Pasadena and ask her. Here's some information about Pasadena, the area, population, and even its local time. So again, very, very cool things. And I would say in an environment that you're studying, or if there was a word that you didn't really know the terminology behind it, like if you're looking up something in medical, you didn't know what the cardiovascular system was, or how that pertained to the other systems in the body, you could highlight that, give you a quick snippet so you don't feel ill-informed as you're reading the rest of the full article. You want to get fully informed, and essentially Cortana can help you out with that feature. But the last feature that is really, really cool is WebNote. So WebNote, as Microsoft has put it, it allows you to annotate the web. And this is true and not really true. So there's two parts to this. What WebNote does is essentially it takes a screenshot, but not just of what you're seeing here. It'll take a screenshot of the whole page. So this is a great example of a really fairly sizable page with a bunch of ads, which a bunch of ads and a bunch of text and a bunch of pictures and everything. So if this were something that I want to save the page on, I could click this little speak bubble and say something like this. This is cool. Yeah, so cool has three O's now. And then down here, I could put another annotation. Sweet. And then maybe one more for just good times ads. All right, so there's that, and that works if you don't have a touchscreen. However, we have a touchscreen, so there are two things you can do with your touchscreen, especially with your Surface Pen. So you can actually mark it up and change the color of your pen and even the size of the pen. So I could say, let's look at that, and then if we scroll back up, we could even highlight. So this area is very important, and so is that part right here. Not so much the other part, but this is going to be something to look into, and so is that. I don't know. At this point, you can save this to your OneNote. So let's go ahead and save that, and you can choose which selection that you want to, or which section you want to save it to, and you get a little bit of a thumbnail of what you're actually saving. So let's send that, or you can share that to other people through Facebook, email, OneNote, or Twitter. And again, probably more options depending on what other apps you have installed that have the sharing functionality turned on. So let's go to OneNote just for kicks and take a look at what you see in OneNote. So this right here was the photo that we had just, or rather the website that we just took a look at. As you can see, I have to zoom out a little bit, but it has all the annotations that we made previously, all the markups, and down here at the bottom, all the way down here at the bottom, kind of inconspicuously put, but you have the actual link to the page itself. Why is this important? Well, truth be told, not everyone's going to get Windows 10. And so if you find this useful and you want to mark up a page, you send it to somebody on Chrome or somebody that has, Firefox or what have you. They can at least see your markups and then go to the original web page from right there. So still very useful. And hey, maybe this gets them into to Windows 10, or at least gets them to download something like OneNote. So yeah, so that's Microsoft Edge. Some of the other setting capabilities, you have developer tools, obviously. As I mentioned earlier, some of the features that are going to be coming out later on this year include the ability for Microsoft Edge to have extensions. Now, we're not quite sure if they're going to be clones of Chrome extensions, or if somebody's going to have to, or rather the developers are going to have to completely rewrite the extensions to work specifically with Microsoft Edge. We have no concrete idea as of yet, but I would just say at this point, stay tuned, because it's pretty freaking sweet that we're going to finally have extensions on the Microsoft side. You already saw settings earlier, but I'll touch in on it one more time. You can actually clear your browsing data, and then under advanced settings, this is where you can block pop-ups, use Flash, which is built in. As you can see, I've turned it off due to the issues that we've been dealing with Flash recently. And then all these things right here. Have Cortana, Sesame, and Edge. Search engine default is Bing. If we click on that, you could add a new one. So if you prefer to use something like DuckDuckGo or Google, you can still use that as your default search engine. And then more and more settings to turn off or on to either help or aid Microsoft make the Edge browser experience that much better. Okay, and the last thing I want to go over is OneDrive. So, as I mentioned before, OneDrive I have not set up. Here's the thing. Finishing setting up OneDrive, I added an IG. The files you sync will take up space on this PC. You can download only some folders or sync files on another drive on this PC. So I can sync them all. If I sync them all, that's going to be just shy of 200 gigabytes. So let's not do that. Let me sync all my photos. Oh wait, my photos take up the most, so that's 46 gigabytes. And I only have 79 gigs remaining. So I don't want to sync any of these. But I still want to be able to access these without syncing them. Can I do that? Let me show you. As it stands right now, not really. As you can see here, I clicked on the OneDrive in the File Explorer, and it brought up all my folders that I have in OneDrive. If I go to the LTG show, because I don't really have anything private in here, again, it shows me folders. But I know for a fact in my LTG show folder, I do have files in the actual folder itself. So it's not showing everything. And when I go to videos, there's nothing. So all you're getting at this point are just thumbnails of the photos, or rather thumbnails of the folders, but not the actual documents themselves. The caveat is this. It's not necessarily a bad thing that you're not getting your full documents, because, like I mentioned earlier, when you pull up your Photos app, or your music app, or your movie app, and you have any of those files saved to your OneDrive, Groove Music syncs with my OneDrive without me having to turn on OneDrive synchronization. If I go into Word, for example, and I want to pull a recently used document, I can go into OneDrive here, and I will still have all of my folders that I can easily access through OneDrive without having to pin it. So yes, it takes a little bit longer because it has to go onto the internet and look for all the folders and everything that I've done. But it's not downloading all the folders and taking up room on my device. This was something that irked a lot of reviewers and Microsoft enthusiasts, and I wasn't quite sure what to expect. And now that I have this, it is kind of an issue. I'm sure there's a third-party solution out there already that is addressing this, but I hope Microsoft themselves eventually addresses it as well too, because I would love to sync my whole folder in OneDrive, at least get the placeholders or the fake thumbnails showing me that there are the documents in this folder versus in that folder. But who's to say that they're going to do that in the future? Anyways, I didn't want to really leave on a sour note with OneDrive. Maybe I should have led with that and finished off with Microsoft Edge. But I'm very, very excited about Microsoft's Windows 10. And like I said earlier, this is not the final build, but it's as close to quote-unquote final as we're going to get when we hit July 29th in a couple of weeks. After July 29th, what's going to happen, at least for the bulk of you, unless you were a Windows Insider, you'll get it on day one. But if for the bulk of you, you'll get the update to Windows 10 within the next week or so. It's going to be a slow rollout. We don't want Microsoft to give it to everybody on day one and then crash the servers, or there be a major bug and it just destroys everybody's computer. The best example of that I can say is when Apple updated everyone or offered the update to iOS 8, and I think they bricked a lot of phones, and it was fixable, but it just was a bad experience for a vast majority of iOS users, and Microsoft doesn't want to have that kind of sting on their back either. So having a gradual rollout, in my opinion, is a better method. And as a Windows Insider, I know I'm going to get it on day one anyway, so I'm not worried either way. So I've had a couple of questions as well too. I'm on Windows 7. It works for me. Should I go to Windows 10? If you have a computer that you've built, you might want to double check with your other OEM devices, or rather components that are in your computer. So like if you have an NVIDIA graphics card or Corsair memory, RAM, things like that, you just want to make sure that the drivers are compatible with Windows 10. Even though Microsoft says everything is compatible, that's also dependent on the software developers and the hardware developers to make their drivers compatible with Windows 10. So there's that. And also, I gotta say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If you like Windows 7, there's nothing forcing you to go to Windows 10. Yes, I mean, if you're a gamer, I'd say without a doubt, because DirectX 12, and there's no question. But if all you do is everyday stuff, web browsing, email, Facebook, and that's it, word processing, things like that, I think in heart of hearts, I think Windows 7 would be fine for you. Where the rub happens is security and support. In Windows 7, we're getting to the point where support for Windows 7 is going to be cut off, obviously way sooner than Windows 10. And in fact, because Windows 10 is a service, theoretically we'll have Windows 10 for another 50 years, and it's just going to be continuously called Windows 10. 50 years from now, Windows 7 is going to be no more. So being on the cutting edge of the operating system is probably to your benefit because of security, rather heightened security. And yes, it's different, but it's really not all that bad. And it's not even something that you have to quote unquote get used to. It's gonna be fairly familiar. And hey, you might even like some of the features too. I love the virtual desktop. I show that to all my friends and it just blows their mind. I know, like I said earlier, there are other operating systems that have that as well too. But the way that Microsoft has done it, or at least the fact that they've done it at all, is pretty freaking cool. If you've watched this whole video through, big ups to you. Thank you so much. Like this video, comment, subscribe, share this video with your friends. If there is something that I missed that you're like, I was really hoping he was going to touch on that. For example, DirectX 12. I don't really have a game that supports DirectX 12 right now to show that off. So there's that. Can't really do that. Streaming your Xbox One games to your Surface, or rather to your Windows 10 devices. But there's a two-part to that. I don't have an Xbox One. I've got a 360. Even if I did have an Xbox One, you have to be in the Xbox One preview developer kind of insider program. I'm not on that either. But I will say this. I have seen it live in an environment where Wi-Fi is terrible. And it streamed it beautifully. and this was Halo 4 that it streamed, and it was using a Wi-Fi, which I'll just say at this moment, usually in best conditions, you would have okay speed of upload and download, and this was actually really good, very low latency. Taking advantage of HoloLens and VR APIs, these are things that are being worked out, and so that's not really at the forefront of Windows 10 right now, but it is something that is coming to Windows 10, and it'll be built into the operating system. So if you are a VR enthusiast, developer, or augmented reality individual that wants to take advantage of those hooks in Windows 10, it's coming. You just have to wait for the final releases of all these VR and AR technologies. If there's still something that you want me to talk about or find out for you, hit me up in this comment section below, and I'll do my best to do the research for you. And I will say this, when July 29th comes along, the world will never be the same. No, I'm just kidding. It's gonna be the same. That's life's gonna go on. But this is awesome. I'm very, very excited for it. So thanks a lot for watching, guys. You stay classy, and we will talk to you in the next one. Late.